Dr. Karen Swallow Prior. Welcome to the Untangled Faith podcast. I'm
It's
so
great to
happy
be
you're here.
back. It's great to be back, Amy. Thanks.
Thank you. I was telling you just a second ago that I would have loved, I was thinking about conspiracy theories for a while, and I wanted to have this conversation even if I wasn't hitting record on this because I think it's unfortunately a timely thing. And I ran across your explainer video that you did for the Holy Post about conspiracy theories, and I thought, is there a way that I can get Karen to say yes to a conversation?
And all you had to do was email me, right? It
All I had
was,
to do was email you.
I'm
This is
just way too easy.
I love it. I love it. There's two kind of lanes that I'm thinking about for ways we talk about this. One is I would love to hear, I mean, I know you don't consider yourself an expert on this, but you've thought about this. What your working definition of like conspiracy theories, misinformation, and then kind of talk about how that interacts with us as evangelical Christians in the US, because I do think it is a particular issue that we are addressing at this time, unfortunately. So tell me your working definition of a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, so as you said, because I insisted on this, I'm not an expert. I come to thinking about this topic as well as a human being, I guess,
Yeah. Yeah.
living at this time in this country and evangelicalism, as we will get to. But also because I spend a lot of time thinking about stories. I love
Yes.
stories. I love imagination. So that's my wheelhouse. And so, of course, I need to think about conspiracy theories because they are a form of story. And so there's, a lot of different definitions you can look up. And I just would kind of boil down a conspiracy theory to its most simple definition, which is it's an explanation about something that's so specific, right? About something. It could
Yeah.
be a
Yeah.
person or an event, something that is centered on some secret inner circle or powerful elite. So it's an
Sure.
explanation, like any theory is of course an explanation. What makes a theory a conspiracy theory is that it's supposed to be something that's being done in secret, and it's always going to be done by people who are in an inner circle or part of some powerful cabal or something like that.
Yeah. What is the appeal to people? Is there a
Mm.
certain like point in our lives we're more susceptible to this sort of thing? Why do we gravitate to this?
Yeah. I mean, if we back up and just think about, sorry, I always have to back up and, and philosophize a little
Back
bit,
all
but
the way up. We will.
okay. But, part of what it means to be human is to seek out meaning and understanding. I mean, we are meaning-making creatures. We want to know why, we want to understand. We're also storytelling creatures, so we love stories. Stories help us. They don't just entertain us, which they do that, but they also offer explanations of things like why something happens or how it happens. And so we love stories, we love theories, but we also, when we get into the realm of conspiracy theories,
Mhm.
we also love to be in on a secret, right? We like
Okay.
to know something that other people don't know. Even if we don't really know, we'd like to think that we know. And so
Yeah.
I would say those are the two things. One is just human nature about stories, and the other is human nature about our desire to have information, to have secret knowledge, to know what other people don't know.
Yeah, there's a little ego thing to that. I
Yeah,
can
of
see that.
course.
Like, I
Yeah.
want to know a secret. I want to be the first to know it. I want to.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with my almost 16-year-old about this the other day, and I was thinking, I was trying to theorize with him. He's taken AP Psych, Introduction to Psych, and I don't know if he has gone through Maslow's hierarchy of needs or not. And I was like, Isaac, do you think maybe people are more susceptible to it if they aren't feeling secure or if they aren't having like certain needs met? And we actually came around to saying maybe it isn't so much that, is that when we hear a theory on something that says something that we kind of want to be true, especially if it's sort of bad news about somebody we consider our on the other side of us as an enemy, as an other, we really we're so quick to believe that. And I don't know if you've observed that. Is this just something I've observed?
Mhm.
Is it
No,
something
I
is there
think
something
that's
in us
that's
that goes, yeah, yeah, that must be it?
that's really insightful because we seldom um pass along or believe in or repeat or are prone to conspiracy theories about our own people, right? Our own
Right.
side. So there's definitely an element of, you know, having a one up on the people that we perceive as our enemies, on the other. And this is why, a lot of our politics, and there's a whole, we still haven't even gotten into the whole social media part of it, which
Yeah.
amplifies all
Yeah.
these things that are true of all human beings in all times and places. But a lot of our politics today are driven by, well, we know we're polarized and
Yeah.
divided
Yeah.
to an
Welcome to the
extreme.
day
Yeah,
after the
yeah,
inauguration.
yes,
Well, we're recording
exactly.
this. Oh
But
boy.
we also, I mean, what we see right now is a tremendous polarization between the people who see themselves as the common person and the elite. Now,
Yes.
the elite could be perceived as someone as the people who have more money than you, more education than you, more power, more influence, whatever it might be. But these elites are the people that the people who see themselves as everyday common people want to
Yeah.
oppose. And so
Yeah.
that happens to be what's happening in our political moment right now, is these dynamics that pit the ordinary person against the elite. And it happens to be in the case of conspiracy theories that
Hmm.
it's that whatever the explanation is, it involves a secret elite or powerful group. And so
Yeah.
these two things converge. Our current day politics are just ripe for the spread of conspiracy theories.
Yeah. When we have an enemy that we want to believe the worst about, when somebody confirms that for us, we're not going to be like, let's put the brakes on and see if this is actually true. Where if somebody said something terrible in like a wild theory about my favorite person, a favorite author or speaker, I would be like, well, let me look into that. Let me look
Right,
into that first,
right,
where
right,
we don't have that same reticence when it comes to our enemies, unfortunately.
right. And
And
again,
so, yeah,
that is human nature. And then
yeah,
I think when we
I've
add,
done that. I mean, I've
oh,
done
I
that
right.
too. I can't
Oh,
say I'm not one that's ever done
right,
that.
right. Of
So,
course, it's human nature. And that, but then we compound all of this with social media,
mhm.
which just amplifies everything. And not only amplifies everything, but it really does distort our perception. I mean, you can point to any day on social media and you can point to an image or a video clip or something that's taken out of context. And I like to do this for myself all the time. I like to look at something, and however it is presented, whichever side is presenting it, it does look like that. And then I will go and watch the whole clip or
Yes, yeah,
see other interpretations of it. And then I'm left going, I have no idea, because these are wildly different
yeah,
interpretations of the very same thing. And yet each is being used and amplified by opposing sides. And each side looks like they are saying something accurate about that
yeah,
meme or clip or whatever. It's
yeah.
it's
We get a
bizarre.
chance like daily, hourly to exercise our discernment. And
Hmm.
sometimes we do better than others. Like even yesterday, I mean, yesterday is such a big emotional day with the inauguration of our new now President Trump, his second term. And there were so many things happening. And the news cycle moves so quickly. You know, my kids were like, did you see what so and so did? And I was like, but where'd you hear it from? Who said it? Is anybody else saying it? Is it your favorite YouTuber? Where is the full clip? Where is the whole thing? And they were sort of irritated with me. Like, Mom, come on. And I mean, it's sort of a killjoy when most people don't want you to say, but are you sure? They don't want, you're not the most fun
Even the
person at the
thing,
party.
even the things that we can see with our own
Yeah,
eyes,
yeah,
again, they can be taken out of context, or they can look one way. And I mean, I
yeah,
was just listening to an interview on NPR the other day, and they were talking about eyewitnesses, and experts laugh at the evidence offered by eyewitnesses. They say eyewitnesses are like the least reliable sources of information, because our own perceptions and memories and interpretations of what we see is so unreliable. And so
And the
we
more we
can't,
tell the story, the more we believe the story we're telling, which I think is really fascinating.
yeah, and you can
Yeah.
misremember
Hmm.
things,
Yeah.
right?
This is a good argument for journaling. Write it down
It,
today. What happened
it's an
today?
excellent argument for journaling.
Why is it so difficult to refute conspiracy theories? why? I feel like they're impossible
Hmm.
to
Well, yeah. I mean,
refute.
so of course there are in the history of the world conspiracies
Yeah. Yeah.
that are done and committed
Yes.
and turn out, oh, that was, there was a conspiracy to do X, Y, and Z. But we don't know that they were conspiracies until they're cracked open, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
you can't prove a negative. So
Okay.
if someone is saying, "Oh, this is what's happening or this is what's going on," and it's still a supposed secret, how can you say that it's not? You literally can't because you can't prove a negative. But you can look at the fact that throughout history, the things that really were
Yeah. Yeah.
conspiracies, people didn't know about until after they after they were,
Yeah. If the
discovered and
lack
not
of
not by the internet.
what you're saying there is interesting. If every lack of evidence that it's true is actually also confirmation that it's true because it's a secret. That's why there's no evidence. You're in this crazy, crazy circle. I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that, yeah, there have been times when we have found out powerful people, government agents have misled us. And I think that is one of the things that is working against this conversation of saying, I really do care about the truth. And I do know that powerful people have a reason to protect their interests. And how can we be patient and without falsely elevating people that we want to default to believe or not believe? How do we navigate that in between of, well, I don't know for sure. I'm not saying I completely believe everything someone tells me, but I also can't live in a world where I question every single thing.
Yeah,
Talk to me
and
about that
I do
tension.
I do think one of the and there's a saying I'm so terrible with saying, so maybe you'll remember this. It's, never attribute to malice what is owing to incompetence. Is that the saying?
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. A conspiracy depends on competence and intention and purpose. And so oftentimes when something, well, even if it's the government or some other powerful institution or group does, covers something up or misleads
Yeah.
us, it's probably more often owing to incompetence. Or even, as you mentioned, sort of the self-preservation,
Yeah.
selfishness, greed,
Yeah.
not a purposeful intent to mislead us, but rather just to protect themselves, or it's usually like very petty reasons. Now,
Yeah.
again, this is not to say there aren't any throughout history grand conspiracies that were
Yeah.
done and committed. I mean, there's, Watergate, right? I mean, that was a conspiracy and
Yeah.
nobody knew about it until it was discovered
Yeah. Yeah.
by, the powers that be, not the internet. And so oftentimes there can be things that are misdone or mishandled and we are misled, but most often that's probably owing to incompetence or
Yeah.
fallibility or
Is it like
pettiness.
Godwin's law or something like that, where you should like the most likely
I think
explanation is
that's Occam's
probably, or
Occam's
Occam's
razor,
razor, where you're like the
right?
most
Yeah,
likely
yeah.
explanation
It is the
is
simplest story.
probably true. Yeah, that
Yeah,
simplest
yeah.
explanation is likely true. I just reread Left Behind, Karen. The
Wow.
wildly popular series that was first published in 1995. That was a long time ago now. I've been rereading some classic influential books from the evangelical Christian world from like the 70s, 80s, 90s through early 2000s to revisit. Did they hold up? What was going on here? And I read a quote from Jerry Falwell Sr. about this, and he referred to this series slash book as the most influential book in Christianity next to the Bible. And this is a book that tells us people are out to get us. We should be ready at any time for an evil government conspiracy to keep us out of church, to keep us from worshiping. And there's an enemy, and you have to really pay attention to all these secret things that has been forming the evangelical Christian church in the US for 30 years.
Our has been forming our imaginations.
Yes, tell me what you think that I feel like it's influenced how we have responded to the pandemic, how we have handled
Mm.
politics. What do you think? as a
Well, yeah,
literature
I mean,
lover.
yes. I mean, I've never read the series, so I only know it as sort of like a cultural and
Sure.
church phenomenon. So I can't
Well,
you
you
you are
missed
really
out.
the left behind expert. I did read Right Behind, which was
Okay.
a parody of the whole thing. That was a fun little book. I don't even remember
Yes.
who wrote that, but um
Well, if you
um
ever heard of Late Great Planet Earth or
oh
any of
yes,
those
yeah,
sort of things,
I grew up with
it
that
was
in my
so I would
household. So
say the
yes.
main theologian on this, that was his influence, very much
Yeah.
into,
Yeah, Hal Lindsey.
yeah.
Yes.
And he was
Yes,
like,
yes.
how do I write a novel? Because nobody really wants to go to a sit and listen to me talk about prophecy. How can I write a novel? Oh, I'll find somebody that's a novelist and I'll tell him what my theology is. That's how it came to be. So,
Right, right, right. Because Left Behind was written by Tim
Jerry Jenkins,
LaHaye
yeah.
and Jerry Jenkins, right? So the
Jerry was
writer
the
and then
novelist
this,
with no
right, right,
idea.
right,
And Tim LaHaye was the person with the idea with no ability to write a novel.
right, right. And as Jerry Senior said, it was the most influential, not I wouldn't say in the church or in Christianity, but in the last few decades.
Yeah.
Yes, our imaginations have been formed not just by, I mean, this novel put flesh on the ideas of sort of the tribulation and a certain
Yeah.
hermeneutics about the rapture and certain timing, which is the the ideas that I grew up with, even without reading these books. Everyone that I knew did, and they were very influential. But it's also it's the theology behind it, the hermeneutics behind it, but then this is a popular level presentation of it that everyone can sort of access, and then it becomes the lens through which you view everything else. And as you said, the pandemic, I mean, if you just simply look, like, no one in the government was interested in targeting churches for
Yeah.
closure. Like nobody, like whether or not
But
everything
there
should
was
have
a
been
group of us
closed or
that were
not, right?
primed to think they do that
Yes,
they
yes,
just
this was
wanted it.
persecution,
This is it.
right?
Yeah.
Right, right. You picked the exact right word. We were primed to interpret it that way. And that is a lot of what conspiracy theories are doing. They're landing on sort of a social imaginary that is primed to interpret something in a certain way.
Yeah. When I recorded the conversation about Left Behind, I had mentioned that I just listened to an interview with Francis Collins talking about his experience through all of that. He wrote a book recently. It was so powerful to hear this man who's dedicated his life. You know, he mapped the human genome. He understands science and he found God while he was studying how the world and how the body, how things work. And he is a sincere follower of Jesus. And he tells about how there were those early drug trials during the earlier days of the pandemic and how he got the results back and just hit his knees, weeping in relief of how grateful he was that they found this. And then to realize that people, so many fellow believers, didn't trust it, didn't believe him, thought that it was some nefarious thing. And to hear him as a real person talk about that experience was really powerful for me. I think sometimes we don't think about the consequences on real people when we believe things and we share things that are false. I mean, think about Pizzagate and like raids that happened to innocent people. And I mean, it's really sad. There's real people involved. I think we
Mhm.
maybe on our screens, we don't think that. Any thoughts on that?
No, I mean it's very sobering and scary. I revisited the Pizzagate situation just recently because if I don't know if you saw in the news, but the perpetrator of Pizzagate was shot and killed by police recently
Mm,
because he was pulled over and had a gun and didn't put it down. And he's actually
mm,
someone who was known to local authorities. Probably, probably mentally ill or struggling with some of his own demons, and then just sort of catapulted into the middle of this conspiracy theory and never and put real lives in danger, and his own
yeah.
life was in danger and is now ended so sadly. And so there are real people, and again, we can disagree on this or that or
Yeah,
this
yeah.
policy or that policy. But we're in a situation now where, because of what people have been primed to believe about the COVID vaccines,
Hmm.
we now have a resurgence or a pending resurgence of polio and measles, because all of a sudden things that have been under control for decades, a century, because of vaccines are now, those are now being questioned by people who don't know anything about vaccines but have been primed to hold certain conspiracy theories about a particular vaccine, and now all vaccines. And do they know anyone who has or had polio? I mean, do they, you know I just I our memories are so short, and our vision is so narrow, and it's so easy to direct our eyes like horses with blinders on in one direction and not see the whole picture.
I think about having conversations with people and I wonder how to navigate them. If somebody comes and says, hey, here's the truth about this. Here's the actual truth about the vaccines. They're bad and people are trying to hurt you and they've hidden all of the bad results from you or, some similar conspiracy. I have not found any success in having a conversation. Any conversations that I have had, I have lost friends with not being willing to believe and go along with what they've said and you know continuing to get like links to read and videos to watch, like overwhelming amount of you need to engage with all of this, and I just have not found a way to do that, to navigate this in a way that is that I don't know, is successful the right word? How do you handle this, like a
Yeah,
friend
I
or a
would
family
say
member?
that most of the time when I have any kind of conversation like this, whether it's in real life or on social media, when someone posts something, the first thing I will ask, because oftentimes it's a meme or something
Mm.
or a statement, and so I'll ask what the source is. And I cannot even count the number of times that the person has said, let me go back and find the source, or not even said that, or, oh, I can't find it now. So oftentimes the conversation will end at that point when I ask the
Mm-hmm.
person to go back and find the source. They
Yeah.
either can't, it's gone, or they are embarrassed to share it. And then other times, if it goes to the next step and the source is given, then another conversation about the reliability of the source comes into play. Although oftentimes, then we get into wars about how all of the sources are unreliable, but and that
Right.
takes that's a deeper, longer conversation about using our discernment and being able to judge evidence and sources and be wise consumers of all media. But oftentimes even just those first steps I think are important. They can get people thinking, especially when those kind times, and there have been more, as I said, more than I can count, where they go back and they can't find the source.
Yeah.
Then that's something that I hope will leave a lingering question in their minds, like, oh, where did I come up with this? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if it will or not, but it's, baby steps.
Yeah. I've asked some people before when they've shared misinformation, not necessarily a conspiracy theory, but lots of misinformation is shared when it comes to politics because we like to share things that make the other side look bad. And I had pushed back on something and said, is that actually true? Did that actually happen? Like, where did that come from? And they said, well, I want it to be true. I mean, it didn't matter. Like, it might have been true. It could possibly be true. I was like, how do you even, where do I even go with that?
There have been other expressions like it could be true, or it seems true. I have seen those same things, and yeah, at that point, I just remember all of the warnings I was given as a, young adult Christian in the 80s and 90s about relativism and postmodernity, and, and the disbelief in truth. And I thought, well, here we are the people that we were warned about.
And the bad actors count on our short memories,
Yes, yes.
unfortunately.
Right. And we have short memories, and then we are just inundated every day with so
The
much that,
news
as you
cycle.
said,
It's
exactly.
so
Yeah,
fast.
yeah.
I've heard people say that you're in an unhealthy relationship if you feel like you have to record the things that were said. And I feel sort of like that when it comes to the way certain news is disseminated. We're like, hold, please. If you are a reputable news organization, you will remind me of the thing that you said last year and
Mm,
if it held up.
right.
And I think like I said, the bad actors are hoping you don't remember the thing that they claimed
Mm-hmm.
3 years ago. And I think about our relationship with Ramsey Solutions and all the changing narratives and how helpful it was for me to be like, oh, yeah, they said this at this time. And now I have this documentation from like depositions and court documents
Mm.
where I can lay that over that and say, here's what actually happened. And I've been thinking about the value of like good reporting and good journalism. And I feel like that can also be something that if people are willing to be good consumers of media, like you said, it's invaluable, really. The good journalists want to get a snapshot of the world as true as it can be, with as much knowledge as they know of the world at this time and place. January, it's the 21st right now of 2025. They do their best to put that into the world so that later on people can go back and say, yes, that happened. Talk to me about being a good consumer of media.
It is knowing the reliability of the source, right? And
Sure.
and so again, to I can't to
There's
wax
a lot of
philosophical
syllables there.
here, right? Yeah. It's journalism is one example, but there are so many where everything has been amateurized and
Mm,
deprofessionalized, whether it's our, drivers or our hotels, we choose amateurs, whether it's our professors, we get adjuncts, right?
good
Like, don't
point.
even get me started on this. So
Cheaper.
everything is, we want an amateur because it's cheaper or whatever, or we don't respect expertise as a
Yeah.
culture anymore. The death of
Yeah.
expertise, that's a whole book. And so even so journalists are, another category of people who, why should we pay a journalist to gain experience and go out on the field when somebody can sit in their basement and blog something out of their imaginations for free, right? I mean, so this is just across the board. I think it's an element of like late modernity and late capitalism because there's so much competition for resources and influence. And so we have to be wise consumers of all of the things, not
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
journal, but we're talking about journalism today. So part of it, is right, knowing that a journalist who works for an institution like, a newspaper or a magazine has some accountability. That doesn't make them perfect.
Yeah.
But we can look at a track record. Sure, we can look at a journal or a newspaper and say, oh, they lean liberal or they lean conservative. We can, no, there's no neutrality, and we need to be wise about that as well. But there is accountability. There is a kind of accountability that the blogger in the basement doesn't have. And so we start with the source, we start with the track, we look at the track record, we look at how they handle errors that are made or
Yeah.
corrections or clarifications that
Hmm.
need to be made. And we recognize that these all happen in time, that something that was true a year ago may have new light on it today. But then you go out on Twitter, we're talking about the election and so forth.
Yeah.
And just yesterday, on Twitter, there were a number of high profile accounts that were saying one thing about TikTok a few years ago and the exact opposite about TikTok yesterday.
Absolutely.
And people were screenshotting, the vastly different things. And so it's good to know that there is a record. You do have to look for it, and there are things that happen in between to be sure. But one of the metaphors I've kind of used to talk about this moment that we're in and talking about this is
Mhm.
that there's an old expression talking about the Middle Ages as the Dark Ages because there was a
Mm.
lack of information. Well, we now live in what I would consider to be a new dark age where we don't lack information, but we have so much information that it's so overwhelming, and we have to pick through and sort through and discern and remember that it is, I don't think, that different from being in a period when there's too little information, too much. can be just as hard to navigate as too little.
Yeah, that's true. I like what you said about the track record, seeing the track record of a journalist or a publication. But I think part of it too is people just have such a short attention span where they don't interested. They're not
Mhm.
interested
Right,
in
right.
seeing that. And I don't know if you have to be personally impacted by something to be interested in
Mhm.
it. You know,
Mhm.
that's my own life, right?
Mhm.
I have had such powerful conversations and experiences and life changes with conversations that have happened with journalists. I think of Bob Smetana
Mhm.
and the decades he has spent being a journalist. And I just shared a quote from him that he had said in a conversation we had on the podcast a couple years ago, where he said, winning isn't the thing, understanding is the thing. And there's so many people that think journalists are trying to win something, where like the really good, thoughtful journalists aren't trying to win something so much as like they'd love to get the story. What they really want is to help the world understand what's happening in a way that they can contextualize it and put like handles on it for you. And that that is invaluable. Like I said before, like, but there's such a short attention span where I would like to sit people down and say, "Do you know what it takes for a journalist to be able to get the green light to publish something?"
Mhm.
And they don't
They don't. Right. Right. They
because
have
they've
no
seen
idea
so
what's
many
behind the
random people
scenes.
say
Right.
whatever
Right.
they want to say. So, well,
Right.
because Joe Rogan can say whatever he wants to say. He's just saying it,
Mhm.
right? There's nobody
Mhm.
saying, "Did you have somebody on the record who's willing to put their name next to it that has any sort of expertise? Did they have documentation?" Like a good journalist says, "I'm
Mhm.
sorry, you sound like you have an interesting story, Amy, but unless you can show me something I can that I can
Right.
corroborate as
Right.
documentation, there's not a whole lot I can do. Unless you can bring me four other people that sat and saw the exact same thing with you that are willing to put your name next to it." Like Joe Rogan doesn't have to do that.
Well, it goes back to the accountability, right? A journalist or a newspaper can get sued for, for presenting things that are not verified and backed up. And people have no idea how it can take a year to make something, lawsuit proof before it can be published. And there is, we can't all care about everything.
Right.
That's impossible. But I think what we need to think about is recognizing that we can't care or know or be passionate or be informed about every single thing. There are the few that that we are for whatever reason, because of our own experience or God's calling or just our
Yes.
inbred passions. But we can refrain and restrain from assuming that the things that we don't know about, that what others say are true. We can refrain from spreading them or gaining uninformed opinions or sharing uninformed views. We can just not have to do it all or know it
Yeah.
all and be content with that. But somehow in this social media driven world, we all have to have a hot take on everything. I mean, I'm guilty of that. I'm definitely
Yeah.
guilty, and I have changed over the past few years because for a number of reasons, but that's not healthy. It's not good. And we just don't know. And we're fed so much distorted
Yeah.
information or misinformation or disinformation that the last thing I want to do is to spread that around no matter which side of my tribe
Yeah.
or my issue
Yeah.
it's on.
I'm more interested in lukewarm and cold takes these days, or something that is baked for a long time.
Yes.
Because in the heat of the moment of things, there's just some things we don't understand that we can get much better clarity on when we see it in context or like zooming out. And if we have a little patience, we can do
Yeah.
that. It's hard.
It
It's
is
hard.
hard. It is
It's
hard.
hard. You know, as people who claim to follow Jesus,
Mhm.
capital T truth, tell me about what you think like the pull towards conspiracy theories has done for the witness of the Christian church, the evangelical Christian church in the US. What have you seen there?
Well,
And
I'm
I
less,
am an
yeah,
evangelical. I
yeah,
consider
yeah,
myself in
yeah,
this too. So
yeah,
I don't want to say
yeah,
it's
yeah.
them.
I mean, I think,
These are
I
my people.
think, I think our whole culture is consumed by and with conspiracy theories because there are dopamine hits and and there
Yeah.
are literal physiological things that happen in our bodies when we get the number of likes or the retweets or the reposts or whatever. And so our whole world is functioning that way. I don't even know that the world is I mean, there are places in our politics and so forth where they're looking at Christians and seeing a bad witness. But what I'm actually more concerned about, there are so many ways that we
Hmm.
are seen as
Yeah.
bad witnesses, but that's always been true.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned about what's happening to us, to our
Mm.
souls, to the church,
Tell me about that.
how we are being formed and malformed as Christians, as believers, as communities. Because if we well, I don't have to be ever we are seeing the fruit of it now. We are seeing the
Yeah.
fruit of mistaking power, political power, um, and influence for spiritual
Mm.
victory and
Yeah.
maturity. I mean, we are in a place now where we have where I have seen people literally say that to follow the way of Jesus or to argue we should follow the way of Jesus is just liberal drivel. Like they think that everything's interpreted politically, and
Yeah.
wins and losses and the advancement of the kingdom of Christ is seen politically. So we are in this moment where we are have been so malformed that we don't know the difference between the literal way of Jesus and what he calls us to and the way of the world.
Yeah. I know you say you're not an expert, but like you wrote a book that we talked about, about the evangelical imagination. So you've spent a lot of time thinking about how our imagination has been formed and how, you know, certain things have gotten in the way of a good, our sentimentality or like even being like, well, I love that painting. It's not true. There's nothing
But I
true
wish it
about it,
were.
but I really like it. I like the
Yeah,
idea
yeah.
of it. But I also, did I hear you or read lately where you talked about sort of revisiting truth in the light of like Pride and Prejudice and Miss Elizabeth Bennet?
Yeah,
She
I
had
mean,
some wrong ideas.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's, for people who've just seen any of the film adaptations, I would argue that they don't really know what the novel is about because the film adaptations don't do a very good job. But the
Yes.
novel is really about Elizabeth Bennet finding out who she is, realizing she doesn't know herself. And she comes to know herself when she realizes that is confronted with the fact that even though she is a person who is sharp and witty and perceptive, that is who she is.
Yeah.
She's not so sharp and witty and perceptive that she can interpret all the things she sees in
Right.
front of her correctly. And so she
Right.
completely misinterprets, the two gentlemen in her life and has to be corrected on that. And of course that ends in a happy marriage, which is part of the story, but the real story is her having to realize that she has misjudged
Hmm.
herself, and because she has misjudged her abilities, she has also misjudged a situation. She has, developed a conspiracy theory basically about what happened between the two male characters in the novel and had to be
Yeah.
corrected. But we're all like that. We're all
Right.
Elizabeth Bennet, and this is
Right.
going
But what
back
do
to,
we do when we're faced with that moment? What do we
yeah,
do then
right.
when
Do
we're like,
we do we
oh
recognize
boy?
that we're wrong? And also, do we even go through life recognizing that we are guided by
Yeah.
underlying assumptions that we don't even know are assumptions, things that we
Yeah.
think are just facts and reality when really they are, they're assumptions, or they're just ways of looking at things that they're not necessarily true for everyone, and they aren't capital T truth, they're just assumptions.
Yeah. My friend Lauren was on the podcast like really early on when I did it, and she'd reminded me that like one of the, foundational truths that Christians have is that having a sin nature means that we don't see everything clearly and that we don't always know what we don't know.
Right.
And by its very definition of having an imperfect understanding and being imperfect, it means there's things right now that we feel like we have figured out or know that later on we're going to find out we were wrong about. But we don't know now.
Right.
So we should hold that in the back of our minds. And it should, I would hope, give us some humility that says, I think I can see this pretty clearly, but this over here, and maybe I'm wrong. I wish more people would say, maybe I'm wrong.
Right. No, humility is the key. That is exactly where my mind went before you said it, is just having that humility to realize that we don't know the whole picture. We don't have all the facts. The people that are oppose us and are doing things that we think probably they shouldn't are probably, not so much guided by malice as they are maybe their own pettiness or
Yeah,
incompetence, just as we are. And so the worst spin that someone could put on us and our behaviors and actions are ones that we should not want to put on other people.
yeah. So you're a lover of literature, related, sort of related. We talked about Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. What's another novel that you love that you would be like, I feel like this really helps with people's imagination?
Mm.
What's a novel you
Well,
love?
a novel I love that also happens to do what you just asked
Okay.
is Great Expectations by Charles
Okay.
Dickens. Now, I realize a lot of people have not necessarily read it. A lot of people have. So I want to say this without giving a spoiler because I really want people to go and read it. It's
But
200 years old,
you
but
want to preserve
okay.
the magic.
I want to preserve the magic. So I
Yeah.
will say this. So Pip fairly early in the novel, runs into great expectations. He's given a great amount of wealth, and based on all of the facts that he has and his limited experiences in life, he makes an assumption that is completely logical, and that that there seems to be no other possibility, even to the wiser reader. But it does turn out to be that he was wildly wrong about his assumptions. And the story that gets told to reveal that is just wonderful and delightful. So I would just recommend that book anyway. It is so fun and enjoyable. It's a literary work, so it's not easy. You have to pay close attention to everything. But it also reveals that something that just looks like this really had to be what was happening was not what was happening at all.
I love that. You cannot take the literature professor out of Dr. Karen Swallow Prior.
No,
You
you
can take her
cannot.
out of the classroom, but you cannot take that out of her heart. I love that so much. You were talking about expectations and misreading things, and I just have to close by telling you I recently read a book that I had an experience of reading the jacket cover on, and I misread it. Karen,
How fun.
I misread it.
Okay,
And so I
what
went
is this
in,
story?
I just read I Cheerfully Refuse by
Hmm.
Leaf Enger. I don't know if you
Hmm.
have read that book.
I
Have you read
have.
it?
Yes, I have.
Okay. The jacket cover said, something about one of the characters' name was Rainy, who was an Orphean bear of a man. Karen, I read that as he was a bear.
Oh,
He was a
like
bear.
an
That
animal?
Rainy, the main character, was a bear.
Bear. Oh,
Okay. So I start reading. I read this, Karen, for like 17 pages thinking, which one of these people is a bear?
wow. Well, it was only 17 pages.
Is
So
someone
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
bear?
Yeah.
Is the bear coming still? Or is one of these people actually a bear? I went back and reread it and I was like,
Oh.
okay.
It's a
That
completely
was,
different story. That would
I
might have been
could
a good
not,
story, but no.
I could not stop laughing. I just was like howling with laughter. People, when you bring your expectations that are wrong, you're gonna read it. You're gonna read it wrong. You might get a good laugh.
Yeah, yeah.
Hopefully, though, if you can figure it out 17 pages into your life or that book before investing the whole
Well,
time thinking it's the wrong
this
thing.
brings us back to reading, and reading is done on the letter level, right? Like
Yep.
bear, like the words, getting the words right, but also reading is an interpretive act. We're constantly like reading the situations and around us and the facts and events, and so we really need to read well, but also recognize that it's very easy to make a mistake. We do it all
Yeah.
the time, and
He
to
was a bear of
realize
a
that
man.
yeah, yeah, he's not a bear.
He was a bear of a
It's a
man.
huge difference.
There is. Well, thank you,
And now you
Karen.
know.
Now I know.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
stopping by and having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I hope
Thanks,
it's
Karen.
enlightening.